Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. There has long been a conspiracy theory known as the Spalding Manuscript theory. The idea was that Sidney Rigdon somehow fed a document originally written by Solomon Spaulding to Joseph Smith, which created the Book of Mormon. There's never been any connections between Solomon Spaulding and Joseph Smith, so Mark Hofmann invented one. Steve Mayfield, in our next conversation, talks about buying this forgery that tried to make the conspiracy theory of Solomon Spaulding real. Check out our conversation. Before we do that, I just want to mention to please sign up for our newsletter. Go to gospeltangents.com/newsletter and sign up. I'll try to start sending them out about weekly. I know I haven't been doing that very often lately. But the idea here is I'll give you some behind-the-scenes look behind Gospel Tangents. Anyway, back to our conversation. So let me ask you this, because jumping back to the dead leaf scroll. So George, you mentioned two things. Number one, so George says that's a terrible forgery.
Yeah.
Wouldn't Mark Hofmann do a better quality forgery? Isn't that a reason to believe
Yes and no.
Not Mark?
Yes and no. Mark did some fabulous jobs on some. Others he did crap. He would crap. He got to a point where he was such a rush to do it. He had one letter that was a legitimate letter in the 1700s, signed Betsy. Just a letter to the family or something. Well, he just had it on Ross. And people bought it. But you look at it, you can see the Betsy and the Ross, and it's different ink, different style. But people bought it. Yeah. I owned a document that was a legitimate document that Mark used and made forgeries on it. Maybe we want to talk about that one. Because I have a copy of it sitting right here.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Here, let me hand both of those to you.
Okay.
Because that one looks better.
Yeah.
That's a better
these
copy.
are photocopies. In right prior, maybe a year before the bombings, Mark claimed he was getting pieces from what is known as the McClellan collection, papers that belonged to William McClellan. And there's a long story with that. Among the documents was a papyrus and a land deed that had the signatures of Solomon Spaulding and Sidney Rigdon on it. Well, of course, the story of that is the fact that there's always that claim that Sidney Rigdon, being in Pittsburgh, borrowed a manuscript that was written by Solomon Spaulding called Manuscript Found or Manuscript Story, took that to Joseph Smith. That's how they created the Book of Mormon. Well, the claim was always, even Sidney Rigdon and Joseph Smith said, I don't know this Solomon Spaulding. I had nothing to do with that. And always been claimed they knew each other. Well, this would kind of give proof they did know each other. So Mark has this document, and he takes it to Elder U. Pinnock of the Council of 70 and says, here's this document, it's part of it, but I need some money so I can buy the McClellan collection. So Elder Pinnock calls, I think, First National Bank, says, because I think he was on the board of directors, says, give this guy a loan for $186,000. Of course, the problem with that is Mark fumbled it and couldn't pay it back time enough, so poor Elder Pinnock had to fork up the money to cover it. But this document, about a month later, was sold to Cosmic Airplane for $400 because he needed the money. He was hurting for money. Well, Cosmic Airplane, they do the investigation. George has it for a year, examining it, gives it back to Cosmic Airplane after the trial.
This is the land deed.
The land deed. In 2000.
This is the land deed. So he sold it for $400,000 that he needed $186,000?
He sold it to Cosmic for $400.
Yeah.
But he got $186,000 on the loan by just showing it to other Pinnock. So that was a lot of money to think. So in January of 2000, the former owner of Cosmic Airplane sold it to Ken Sanders, who used to work there, but now had his own bookstore there and sold like Ken Sanders books. Well, he had it on display, and I'm just sitting there just, I would love it, but it was like $4,000 he wanted for it. Well, I had enough in a credit card, so I bought it from him.
Oh my goodness!
In August of 2000. So for 4 years, I owned.
You knew it was a forgery.
Yeah, it sold as that.
Okay.
Immediately I sold it. After I bought it, I take it back to the office and show George, and he showed some things on the document that only he and I know. There's certain things that a document person does. So, but he verified, that's the document I examined, and here's this and this. So I owned it for 4 years, showed it at some symposium, and then in 2004, I donated it to BYU. So the document's down at BYU. It was starting to crumble apart. And now the significance of the document is the fact that and here's a photocopy of it,
Okay.
is the fact that
Okay.
you see that there's names here of, if I do it right.
Here, well, actually, that other one's easy to read, and plus
Yeah,
it's in color.
Photo, yeah. Here we
I'll
have
zoom in on there.
Sidney Rigdon,
Okay.
and over here is Solomon Spaulding. It's the Connecticut land in which a gentleman by the name of Jesse York, and this is back in Connecticut, is selling some of his land to his wife's, Asa Spaulding, wait a minute, okay, Asa Spalding is selling some land to his wife's cousin, Jesse York. The problem you have with the document is that Mark made some changes. Besides adding those two names, the original date up here is not 1822, but it's 1792. So Mark changed that.
Yeah, and you can see that. It looks totally scratched out wrong.
And then he also wrote it at the top, 1822.
I don't know if we're going to be able to see that on the video, but...
Okay, the very top. Now on the side down here, there was the original had some squirrely things down here, but he apparently cut it out for some reason. This is a legitimate land deed from 1792. These other signatures are legit. The writing's legit, but he added the names, changed the date.
So he added the name Solomon Spaulding.
Yeah, and Sidney Rigdon.
Sidney Rigdon, okay.
And changed the dates. So anyway, like I said, this was the one that he was able to get money from the bank, and that was a controversy. Now, the fun part is after I bought it, I was making photocopies of it, and on the back of the thing, usually on the back, when they fold it, there's a section where they have some writing when they fold it away. Well, I did it in a dark coloring, and you see here in the very back in the middle, there's some writing.
You can't read. You'll have to read it.
Yeah, it's very faint, but even on the original, you can't see it until you darken it up, and it says, deed from Asa Spaulding to Jesse York, 1792. Mark missed it. Didn't see in the back, but it's like, he turns the page over, and you couldn't actually see it with your naked eye until I darkened it up.
Mm-hmm.
So he missed it. There's a document, but he just made some changes on it.
Okay.
And that's what you again with the Bessie Ross, and he probably did others. Now we've had over the years since he's gone to prison some documents. There was one that was a marriage certificate out of Kirkland, signed by Joseph Smith for a Marshall Brewster and a Chloe Smith. Again, my friend Craig Foster, who works at the Family History Library, checked the actual records of the Kirkland marriage book, and there's Chloe Smith, Marshall Brewster, married by Joseph Smith. Now, nothing significant about it, except the fact that this document we knew came from Hofmann. But I'm thinking, back at the time, before his forgeries were uncovered, what if I was a descendant of these people? How much money would I be willing to pay to have the actual document, a marriage certificate? I'd probably be begging all my relatives, we need to have that certificate. That would have made him a lot of money. And we all noticed on this page of these marriages out of Kirkland, 4 or 5 different people. You wonder, did he just do the one, or did he make copies for everybody? So all he did was and he was good at the point that he could do Joseph's autograph. And he was able to age ink, do something to the paper. Now here's the thing, a lot of his forgeries, he would do things to the paper. He'd kind of rip them, have rips in them, or water stains on them, or darken them, or something like that, because it gets to your idea that, well, all old documents are deteriorating and they're crumbing. But not necessarily. Down at the archives at BYU, I was shown some of the original handwriting of the sections of the D&C, Doctrine and Covenants. And those papers are preserved. The papers are turning brown, but perfect. No cuts, no water stains, nothing on them. The Whitney family did a good job of taking care of these documents. So not all old documents are beat up. But Mark kind of thought that's what they look like, and people bought into it because they were not sophisticated enough to read it. Yeah. So anyway, I for 4 years I had a good time with that one, and
wow.
So those were the involvement. Now there is another one that probably the last one, although I think the people working on Joseph Smith papers last couple of years had one in their collection that they said was most likely a Hofmann. I can't remember the.
Now, let me just back up.
Okay,
I'm sorry to keep going back to that.
That's okay.
Because one of the things you mentioned before we turned the camera on was that both Will Bagley and Richard Turley had used the Dead Sea Scroll in their. Is that in this book here?
I think so. And I can't remember which one Will. But yeah,
well,
Will had two books. One, he just makes a footnote on it. Another book, he takes this one document. What it is a typed.
So wait a minute.
Yeah.
So if this wasn't discovered until you said 2002, so it was believed legitimate for a while? It
wasn't this document. It was
no. I'm talking about the scroll.
Okay, yeah.
So because the scroll used in the early book?
No.
Oh, I misunderstood.
No.
That.
Okay, the document that we're talking about is this affidavit by a I've forgotten his name. Young man, Edwards, I think his name was. He was 15, and he was at Mountain Meadows.
Oh. So this is a different story.
Yeah. Okay. Different document altogether. This young man was there in 1926. He's been a bishop. He writes an affidavit, supposedly a typed affidavit. Has it signed? He signed it and a judge signed it, talking about being there at Mountain Meadows. Nothing sensational other than he's the last living survivor of Mountain Meadows.
On the Mormon side.
Yeah. So now you have Leonard or the Turley book referencing it in a footnote. One of Will Bagley's references, but another book that.
So what did the document actually say?
It just says I was there. This is what happened. Blah blah blah. It doesn't point the finger at anybody. But it's
sort of an innocuous document, but it just says he was part of the
there. Yeah, and he literally was. We knew he was there. Well, when this and one of the books, Will Bagley quotes the whole letter. Well, when they did a book review on that book, a lady up in Seattle named Polly Aird, an independent historian, said, you better think twice about that one, because she knew the people in the state archives where the document was being held, saying that they'd gotten this document from a guy named Lynn Jacobs, who was one of Mark's associates back during this time. Lynn has since passed away. Well, both the state archives and the church says, I think we ought to look into it. Prior to this, George Throckmorton had spent some time with the archivist up at the church historians department, teaching some fundamentals about forensic document examination. Well, timed right, because now they bring this up there. George comes down, and these archivists up there, people work with the documents, and looked at it, where they figured that they saw that this document, which was a letterhead of this particular judge, was a legitimate letterhead piece of paper. But they saw that the signatures were traced. It's a technique of putting the paper on top of a legitimate and then trying to copy it. Well, the coup de grace, the whole thing is they take this document back to New York to a guy named Peter Teitel in the forensic document business. He's the typewriter guy. He does all that work on it. His father was sold typewriters and was a typewriter repairman, so he transferred that over to his own education. And so you have a document that has typewriting. He looks at it. Well, he determined. Now, this document was supposedly done in 1926. Well, he found out the typewriter used on this document was a 1950 Royal typewriter. So it's like, yeah. And the fact that then also Brent Ashworth, who was one of Mark Hofmann's victims, said, I sold or gave these letterheads to Mark Hofmann, and if there had been anything on Mountain Meadows, I would never have given anything to him. So we kind of make that connection. It went from Brent to Mark.
So Brent gave him some blank paper with letterhead.
Yeah.
Mark types it up on a 1950 typewriter.
Yeah. Gives it to Lynn, who then donates it to the state archives, and then
which Richard Turley and Will Bagley use.
Quote from, which made
what a mess.
Yeah. But what it also says is that there are documents out there. Now, I think 1988 or around that time, Mark was pulled out of his cell and being interviewed because there had been stories that he had was trying to hire somebody to bump off some people, like one of the people on the pro board and George Throckmorton. So interviewing him. So they did a cell search, and they came up with a one sheet of yellow prison paper where he wrote about on the top, famous Mormons who I've forged, and on the other side, famous Americana I've forged. We look at these names, there's a couple names on there that we don't have documents for. We don't have a forgery or anything related to that. So there are probably documents that are still out there that Mark Hofmann did that they just haven't shown up. So it bequeaths that collectors of documents, whether libraries or something, need to think twice. You need to be careful. Brent Ashford talks about the Emily Dickinson poem. There was a poem that one of the major document auction houses had that was a Hofmann forgery. It was a poem, and they struggle with it. They don't want to admit it, and Brent Ashworth was the one that brought it to their attention that it was a Hofmann forgery. And again, something that comes up after he's gone to prison and everything, but they find these things. In fact, there was a book written on that, The Poet and the Murderer.
Yes.
Was about that particular document. And so the intrigue is still out there. And like I said, that we need to not be so excited when some documents, and that's probably, I mean, this is how Mark played the game, because we knew that people had documents, material that an institution didn't have. His claim was, well, I did my backwards genealogy. Instead of going back, I went forward and found the great grandson of some famous Mormon, i.e. Bullock, you know. And I went to the family and said, I can help you with this. And oh, here comes the Joseph Smith III blessing from the Bullock family up in Colville. But don't bother these people. They want me to be the old go-between. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be hassled. Okay. And here's this document, which is, again, each document has their own little history and story. Because a couple years back, the kindness of Brent Ashworth, we released at a Sunstone Symposium a tape recording that Mark made back in the early 1980s when he had this Joseph Smith III blessing, calling the Community of Christ for the Reorganized Church, saying, I got this document, where he's calling for the church historian. And he reads it to him, and it's an intriguing tape recording that he did. And they're like, wow. And so, great story. I got this. It relates to you. Blah blah blah. I want to trade it for a book of commandments. Yeah, right. And they want it. So they plan on coming out the next week to Salt Lake to do it. Well, before they got out there, he goes down to the LDS Church in Salt Lake, and he trades it with them. So here come the Community of Christ folk. What the heck's going on here? You double dealed on us. So there was a story on that one, but this tape recording is great. Maybe you want to do a program with just playing that tape, because it's an hour tape where you hear him playing this little game. He's just bringing these people in, and they're buying this whole thing. The actual document where Joseph is blessing his son to be his successor, which was for a long time part of their policy. And interesting story with that. 1982, Mormon History Association was meeting in Ogden. They had a particular session in the LDS Institute chapel to talk about the blessing. And Mark was up there, This is one time I ever met him. I shook his hand and whatever that you call that, meeting him. Well, as he's telling this story, I did this and this and that. Out in the audience was Richard Howard, who at the time was the church historian for the RLDS Church, who had all these dealings. Well, he was not very discreet. His comment, every time Mark would make a comment, and I won't use the full word, but he was going, BS, BS, BS. But use the full word every time Mark said something. And people were out here just chuckling. But they did the smart thing, because actually they took the document and had it authenticated by good professional people, said it's authentic. But the dealings was the fact he double dealed on him, and he said, we'll never deal with this man again, which saved them a lot of the problems. That it's too bad this stuff wasn't passed on. But part of the problem too is people that he dealt with were willing to keep secrets. Don't tell them where you got it from. In fact, you had the Salamander letter that he claimed gave it to Lynn Jacobs, but Lynn claimed he got it. I've got too many documents. Maybe you've claimed. So Lynn went along with it, so he could convince people to do things for him. Brent Metcalf, and I don't blame them that they had some negative or they had some nefarious thing what they're doing, but they were all part of this claim. And you had like Shannon Flynn, Brent Metcalf, and Lynn Jacobs were the ones that dealt with him, dealt with there. So and I guarantee you that the police did look at these guys and see if they did anything, but they did nothing.
They sure looked at Shannon. They put him in jail.
Yeah, well, that was over something else. But,
yeah, I know.
But I know because my involvement, because I was in Colorado as a deputy sheriff, I got 2 interviews with Bob Stott and Brent Forbes, Dick Forbes, one of the detectives on it, by phone, and once in office. And their dealings were asking me, and I've told this, so it's nothing like surprising. my knowledge of Lynn Jacobs and Brent Metcalf, because they were friends of mine. What I knew about their involvement with Hofmann, So, they were doing their job, kind of trying to connect the dots between Mark, because some people thought that he couldn't have done this alone. One time, Sandra Tanner asked me, could somebody else, I just don't think he could have done this all alone. Well, he did, but he was able to manipulate and use people. And that's the sad thing. It's like, maybe we need to communicate more often to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so but the tragedy is that, that two people died. I get kind of cringe when I hear people on the media or something call him, Mark Hofmann, the forger. No, he's a murderer. Forgery is secondary to all this. And I know that there's a documentary that's being put together, and the Facebook page on is The Forger. Well, okay, we look at that, but no, he's a criminal, he's a murderer, and he's where he needs to be. And most likely he'll die in prison. So.
Not soon enough.
Well, I won't predict. I will just say, he's where he should be.
All right. Well, Steve, I appreciate it. Appreciate you letting me spend so much time with you. And any last thoughts you want to say before we go?
Enjoyed the interview, and I didn't lose my cool, I hope. I didn't swear, so but I look forward to it. And right. Maybe down the road more stuff comes up. And like I said, I collect this stuff not to hide it away or keep it secret, but to be used by scholars and researchers and things like that. So eventually it'll all go to BYU, and so look for the Mayfield collection down there.
All right, will do. Well, appreciate you spending your time here on Gospel Tangents. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Steve Mayfield. I'd like to thank Steve for spending so much time talking with us and talking more about the Mountain Meadows Massacre, Hofmann forgeries, and Mormons and crime. It was a really fun conversation. Thanks, Steve. In our next conversation, I'd like to introduce a brand new scholar, Dr. Daniel Stone. We're actually going to continue to talk more about the Spalding conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and so they're somehow trying to connect Sidney Rigdon to Solomon Spaulding because they're from the same area. And people just thought it was more than a coincidence that Sidney Rigdon all of a sudden meets Joseph Smith in Ohio when he's a Campbellite minister, and that just so happens to believe in the gathering of Israel and communal living, very similar. So they're like, oh no, Sidney Rigdon helped write it. Because according to a lot of the theories, before they ended up finding the Solomon Spaulding manuscript, decades later, I think it was in the 20th century they found it, a lot of people were saying, oh, I remember Solomon Spaulding, the manuscript, he wrote this novel, and it talks about people coming from, from like Israel or from the Middle East to come over to the United States. I remember names like Lehi and Nephi.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.